I got something important for you today, Alex. Have you been following the recent Tesla developments? It's quite significant.
Absolutely. I've been following this Tesla situation super closely. The sales numbers that just came out are, totally shocking. I mean, we're talking about the biggest sales decline in Tesla's entire history, right? I'm so excited to dig into this whole mess on today's episode of Tesla Sales Plunge Biggest Decline in History.
Yeah, it's pretty unprecedented. I mean, Tesla has always been this untouchable success story in the EV world, but something seems to be seriously shifting. I'm really curious to get your take on what's actually happening behind the scenes.
Well, there's just so much going on here, we've got the Elon factor, the political stuff, production issues, and then there's all this competition coming from China. It's like a perfect storm hitting Tesla all at once. The numbers are honestly worse than most people expected, and I can't wait to break it all down for everyone.
All right, so let's get into the actual numbers here. How bad is this sales plunge exactly? Because I've heard it's pretty dramatic.
Yeah, so the actual drop it's like a 13% decline in Tesla deliveries for the first quarter of 2025, which is just, absolutely massive for them. This is literally the largest drop in Tesla's entire history. I mean, we're talking about a company that used to post growth numbers that were just like mind-blowing quarter after quarter.
Wow, 13%. That's not a small dip. That's a serious decline. Do we know what that means in terms of actual cars?
So the raw numbers are pretty staggering. Tesla delivered 336,681 cars in the quarter, which sounds like a lot, right? But that's actually 50,000 fewer vehicles compared to the same period last year. Imagine 50,000 cars just gone from their sales. That's roughly the size of a small city's worth of vehicles that they didn't sell.
That really puts it in perspective. I mean, 50,000 cars that's a lot of lost revenue, right?
Exactly. And what's really concerning is that this is their worst sales performance in nearly 3 years. The last time they had numbers this low was back during, very different market conditions. And Tesla's whole thing, their whole identity and stock valuation has been built on this narrative of, unstoppable growth. And now, well, that story is changing pretty dramatically.
So this isn't just a tiny blip then. This seems like it could be part of a larger trend.
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely part of a bigger pattern we're seeing. And what's really telling is that analysts were already expecting Tesla to have a pretty rough quarter, right? But even with those lowered expectations, Tesla still managed to, underperform. The analysts were thinking they'd deliver around 350,000 vehicles at the low end, and Tesla couldn't even hit that mark.
That's not great for investor confidence, I imagine.
Not at all. And I think that's why we're seeing the market react so strongly. This isn't just a slight miss. This is a clear sign that something fundamental might be changing with Tesla's position in the market. And the thing is, these numbers are really hard to spin in a positive way, you know what I mean? When you're down 50,000 cars from last year, that's just objectively concerning.
So, what exactly is going on here? I mean, a drop that big doesn't just happen for no reason, right? What's behind all this?
Well, there's actually a pretty major factor that we need to talk about, and that's the intense political backlash against Elon Musk. See, it's not just about the cars anymore. It's about, Musk himself and all his political activities, especially his role in the Trump administration heading up that Department of Government Efficiency.
Oh, right. I've seen some of those protests in the news. How widespread is that actually getting?
It's getting really serious. There have been protests literally outside Tesla showrooms across the country. People are actively demonstrating against Musk and the policies of the Trump administration. And it's not just peaceful protests either. There have been actual instances of vandalism against Tesla facilities. Some charging stations have been damaged, and even some cars have been targeted.
Wait, seriously? People are vandalizing the actual cars?
Yeah, absolutely. There was even this crazy incident where someone was throwing Molotov cocktails at Teslas. I mean, that's extreme, right? CNN actually showed footage of it. And all of this negative publicity, it's having a real effect. Imagine you're thinking about buying a Tesla, and then you see all these protests and vandalism. It's probably going to make you think twice. You know what I mean?
I can see how that would really impact someone's purchasing decision. Has Tesla addressed any of this directly?
That's the interesting thing. They haven't. In their sales statement, they completely avoided mentioning any of the protests or the political backlash. Instead, they pointed to this technical explanation about updates to the Model Y that temporarily stopped production at all 4 of their factories for several weeks.
So they're basically sidestepping the whole political dimension?
Exactly. They're totally trying to frame this as just a manufacturing issue. They even included this really generic statement thanking their customers, employees, suppliers, the usual corporate language. But what they're not saying might actually be more important than what they are saying.
What about the polling data? Is there anything that shows how much this political stuff is actually affecting consumer sentiment?
Oh, the polling data is really revealing. There was a CNN poll last month that found only 35% of Americans have a positive view of Musk, while a majority, like 53%, have a negative opinion of him. He's actually become more unpopular than many politicians. And the really crucial part is that these negative views of Musk are directly bleeding over into people's perceptions of Tesla.
I'd imagine that's especially true among certain demographics, right?
Totally. And that's the real killer for Tesla. The people who are most turned off by Musk's politics tend to be liberals, right? And guess what? That's exactly the demographic that's traditionally been most interested in buying electric vehicles in the first place. So Tesla is essentially alienating its core customer base.
That seems like a really dangerous business position to be in.
It absolutely is. And it's creating this weird situation where Tesla's brand is being defined more by its CEO's political activities than by the actual cars. I mean, the whole identity of the company is shifting in the public eye. It's no longer just this innovative EV maker. It's now becoming this politically charged symbol, and that's really problematic for their sales, especially in certain markets.
So, what did Tesla actually say about all this? Did they, acknowledge any of these political factors in their official statement?
No, they didn't mention any of that stuff at all, which is really telling, right? Instead, they completely focused on these Model Y production updates. They basically said that, they had to temporarily halt production at all 4 of their factories for several weeks because they were updating the Model Y.
Several weeks of halted production? That seems pretty significant.
Yeah, it's a huge deal. I mean, we're talking about all 4 factories completely stopped for weeks. That's going to have a massive impact on their numbers. And the thing is, while that's probably a legitimate factor, it feels like they're using it to, deflect attention from all the political stuff, you know what I mean?
Did they offer any other explanation in their statement?
Not really. It was actually super brief. They just said thank you to all our customers, employees, suppliers, shareholders, and supporters who helped us achieve these results. And that's pretty much it. They're calling a 13% sales drop something to celebrate, which is, kind of weird when you think about it.
So they're basically avoiding the elephant in the room?
Exactly. They're totally sidestepping the whole political controversy thing. And what's interesting is that even with the production updates explanation, analysts were still expecting better numbers. Most of them had predicted sales of at least 350,000 units, but Tesla delivered way less than that.
I'm curious about these Model Y updates. Do we know what they were changing that required shutting down production for so long?
They didn't really go into specifics about what the updates were, just that they were making changes to the Model Y. The Model Y is their best-selling vehicle, though, so any disruption to its production is going to have major ripple effects across the whole company.
Do you think the production halt was actually planned, or could it have been a reaction to slowing demand?
That's a really good question. Some industry analysts are wondering the same thing. There's this theory that maybe Tesla saw demand dropping and decided to use this time to update the production lines rather than build cars they couldn't sell. It's kind of convenient timing, right? When sales are already struggling due to all these other factors, suddenly you need to shut down production for updates.
So either way, it sounds like Tesla is facing some serious challenges right now.
Absolutely. Whether it's the political backlash or production issues, or most likely both, Tesla is in a tough spot. And these production halts, they're expensive too. Having factories sitting idle for weeks really hits their bottom line hard, you know?
So Alex, putting this all in perspective, has Tesla ever seen a drop like this before? I mean, is this, normal for them at all?
Oh my God, no! That's what makes this so shocking, right? Tesla has been this absolute growth machine for years. I mean, historically, we're talking about a company that was seeing 20% to 100% growth pretty much every quarter. And that's That's not an exaggeration. They were literally doubling their sales year over year in some quarters.
Wow, that's incredible growth. So this 13% decline is really unprecedented then?
It's completely unprecedented. I mean, the only other time they saw any drop in quarterly sales was back in 2020, and that was, during the pandemic when everything was shut down. And even then, the drop was much smaller than what we're seeing now.
When did this pattern of decline actually start for them?
So, the decline really started to become noticeable in 2023. That's when they reported their first annual sales drop. But what's really concerning is how it's accelerated in 2025. This first quarter is it's brutal. And you know what's kind of crazy? This massive growth rate was a huge part of why their stock price was so high for so long.
I'm curious, how did investors typically justify Tesla's sky-high valuation?
Well, investors were basically betting on this continued explosive growth, right? They weren't valuing Tesla like a normal car company. They were valuing it like a tech company that happened to make cars. And the thing is, when you're growing at 50% or 100% year over year, you can kind of justify those crazy valuations. But now, with sales actually going down, that whole growth narrative is it's completely falling apart.
So this isn't just a small bump in the road, this is potentially a major inflection point for Tesla?
Exactly. This could be a real turning point. I mean, Tesla had convinced everyone they could keep growing at this insane pace forever. Now we're seeing that, maybe they can't. And the timing couldn't be worse because competition is ramping up everywhere, especially from Chinese manufacturers. It's like they're hitting this wall right when others are accelerating, if that makes sense.
And I imagine this must be especially jarring for a company that's been so used to success.
Totally. I think there's this corporate culture at Tesla that's built around being this unstoppable force. Musk has always positioned them as this revolutionary company that's changing the world. And suddenly they're looking very mortal, very vulnerable. That's got to be a massive psychological shift for everyone from the executives down to the factory workers.
So what's been happening with Tesla stock through all this? I imagine investors aren't, too happy about these numbers.
Oh man, it's been a wild ride. So after the election, Tesla shares practically doubled in value. Everyone was betting that Musk's close relationship with Trump would, lead to policies that would be super advantageous for Tesla. There was this whole narrative about regulatory favors and government contracts.
And has that actually played out the way investors hoped?
Not even close. Since hitting that all-time high in December, Tesla stock has absolutely crashed. We're talking about a 44% drop in value. That's almost half the company's market cap just gone. And it's really showing how much the Musk factor is now working against Tesla rather than for it.
What happened after today's sales report came out?
So initially the stock dropped another 2% in early trading, which honestly wasn't as bad as I expected given how terrible those numbers were. But then something really interesting happened. Politico put out this report saying that Musk is apparently stepping back from his formal role in the Trump administration. And the stock actually rebounded pretty sharply on that news.
Wait, so investors see Musk leaving his government role as a positive for Tesla?
Absolutely. The market reaction tells you everything you need to know. Investors are basically saying, please, Elon, focus on your car company and stop getting involved in all this political stuff. According to the Politico report, he might stay on as an informal advisor, but stepping back from that Department of Government efficiency role seems to be exactly what investors wanted to hear.
That's fascinating. So the very political connection that initially boosted the stock is now what's dragging it down.
Exactly right. It's this complete reversal. What looked like an advantage has turned into this massive liability. And you know what's crazy? This whole stock story is really a reflection of the broader Tesla narrative right now. This company that used to benefit from everything Musk did is now being damaged by his actions outside of Tesla. It's like the Elon effect has completely flipped from positive to negative.
So, Alex, I'm really curious about what analysts are saying about all this. I mean, this sales decline is pretty dramatic, right?
Oh my God, yes. The analysts are absolutely freaking out right now. You know Dan Ives from Wedbush Securities? He's been one of the biggest Tesla bulls for years, right? He just came out and said, "The street and us knew a bad quarter was coming, but this was even worse than expected." And he didn't stop there. He actually called this a brand tornado crisis for Tesla.
A brand tornado crisis? That's quite the description.
Yeah, it's pretty intense language, but honestly, it's not wrong. Ives basically said this quarter is a perfect example of the damage that Musk himself is causing to Tesla. He called it a dark chapter for the company. And the key thing he emphasized is that this is really a moment of truth for Musk to navigate through all this brand damage and somehow get to the other side.
Do you think the brand damage is solely from his political activities, or is there more to it?
It's definitely way more complex than just politics. So, there's this CNN poll from last month that found only about 35% of Americans have a positive view of Musk, while 53% actually view him negatively. Those are really bad numbers. And here's the thing. He's now become more recognizable and more unpopular than Vice President J.D. Vance. That's saying something.
And how directly is that affecting Tesla's business?
It's having a massive impact. See, the problem is that those negative opinions of Musk are totally bleeding over into how people view Tesla as a brand. And what's particularly damaging is that liberals, who were traditionally the demographic most interested in buying green electric vehicles, are now the ones most turned off by the brand.
Are there any specific numbers showing that shift?
Yes. There's this February poll by Morning Consult that showed nearly 32% of U.S. buyers would not consider buying a Tesla under any circumstances. And that number has been steadily climbing. It was only 27% a year ago, and just 17% back in 2021. So in just a few years, we've seen a complete transformation in consumer sentiment toward Tesla.
That's a pretty dramatic shift in public perception.
Totally. And it's fascinating because Tesla used to be this aspirational brand that people on both sides of the political spectrum could embrace. But now Musk has essentially transformed it into this politically polarizing company. And the real issue is that the people he's alienating are exactly the same people who have traditionally been most likely to buy electric vehicles in the first place. So it's like he's purposely driving away his core customer base.
What's really fascinating to me is how this whole situation is playing out differently across the country. Are we seeing geographic differences in how people are responding to Tesla now?
Oh, absolutely. S&P Global Mobility has been tracking sales on a state-by-state basis, and what they found is it's mind-blowing, really. There's this massive divide happening between what they call blue states and red states. So in blue states, places that have voted Democrat in the last 4 presidential elections, the percentage of current Tesla owners buying another Tesla dropped from 72% to just 65% by the end of 2024. That's a huge loyalty drop in just 1 year.
And what about the red states? Are Tesla owners there showing the same pattern?
That's the crazy thing. They're not. In red states, the repeat buyer percentage actually edged up slightly from 47.6% to 48.2% during the same time period. But, and this is a big but, the overall loyalty percentage in red states is still way lower than in blue states. So even though blue states saw this big drop, they're still holding at 65% loyalty compared to just 48% in red states.
So Tesla is still more popular in blue states, but that's where they're losing ground faster?
Exactly. And it makes perfect sense when you think about it. Blue states have always been Tesla's strongest markets, right? They've got more charging infrastructure, more environmental regulations encouraging EV adoption, and historically, more consumers interested in electric vehicles. So Tesla has more to lose in those places.
That feels like a dangerous trend for the company, doesn't it?
It's super dangerous. These blue state customers were Tesla's bread and butter for years. And even though the company is gaining a tiny bit of traction in red states, it's nowhere near enough to offset what they're losing elsewhere. You know what I mean? This political polarization is literally reshaping their entire customer base.
Do we know if Tesla is trying to address this issue directly?
That's the thing. They're not really acknowledging it publicly at all. In fact, in their quarterly statement, they completely avoided mentioning any of the protests or political backlash. Instead, they focused entirely on those Model Y production updates we talked about earlier. It's like they're hoping if they don't talk about the political elephant in the room, maybe it'll just go away. But the numbers don't lie, right? This polarization is happening whether they acknowledge it or not.
So we've talked about what's happening here in the US market, but what about internationally? Is Tesla facing the same kind of challenges abroad?
Oh my god, yes, and in some ways it's even worse. Like, in Europe alone, and this is just incredible, Tesla sales fell 49% in the first 2 months of the quarter. That's almost half their business gone in a major market. And the crazy thing is that EV sales overall in Europe actually grew by 28% during the same period. So it's not like Europeans suddenly stopped wanting electric vehicles, they just stopped wanting Teslas specifically.
That's a massive drop. What's driving that specific to Europe?
Well, part of it is definitely political, just like we're seeing here. Musk has been really vocal in his support of far-right political parties in Germany and the UK. And European consumers tend to be pretty politically conscious about where they spend their money. But honestly, it's not just politics. The competition in Europe is absolutely fierce right now.
What kind of competition are we talking about?
So many brands. You've got all the European automakers who've been pouring billions into their EV programs. Volkswagen, BMW, Mercedes. But the real threat is coming from China. Chinese manufacturers are flooding the European market with EVs that are often cheaper and sometimes even more advanced than Teslas.
Does Tesla break down their sales numbers by country? Do we know exactly how they're doing in each market?
That's the thing. They don't. Tesla doesn't break out its sales by market in their reports, which makes it hard to get the complete picture. But industry analysts can piece together the data from registration numbers and other sources. And what's clear is that Tesla is facing serious headwinds in pretty much every international market right now.
And what about China specifically? I know that's a huge market for EVs.
China is absolutely crucial. It's not just the largest market for EVs in the world, it's Tesla's second largest market after the US. But here's where it gets really interesting. Chinese automaker BYD is absolutely crushing it right now. They're becoming this existential threat to Tesla's global dominance in the EV space. And the numbers are just mind-blowing.
How so?
BYD sold more than 416,000 pure electric vehicles in the quarter. That's a 39% increase from last year. Meanwhile, Tesla's down 13%. So we're looking at this massive divergence where the challenger is growing rapidly while the longtime leader is shrinking. And you know what? This isn't just a quarterly blip. BYD has actually pulled ahead of Tesla in EV sales for several quarters in recent years.
So let's talk about BYD specifically. I mean, those numbers you just mentioned are pretty staggering. 416,000 EVs in a single quarter?
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. That's 80,000 more vehicles than Tesla sold. And the growth rate, 39% year-over-year increase, is just phenomenal, especially when you compare it to Tesla's 13% decline. And, while Tesla has always managed to maintain the lead in full-year sales up until now, 2025 is looking like the year that crown finally changes hands.
What does that mean for Tesla's identity? They've always positioned themselves as the EV leader.
That's exactly it. Tesla's whole brand identity has been built around being the pioneer, the innovator, the market leader. And losing that position to BYD, it's not just about numbers on a spreadsheet, it's about the narrative. The story is changing from Tesla is revolutionizing the automotive industry to Tesla was the pioneer but couldn't maintain its lead. And that shift in perception can be really damaging to their premium brand image.
What advantages does BYD have that's helping them pull ahead so quickly?
So many things. First off, price point. BYD's EVs are generally much less expensive than Tesla's, which makes them accessible to a broader market. But don't think for a second that cheaper means lower quality or less innovation. BYD is actually pushing the envelope in some really exciting ways.
Like what?
Just this month, BYD unveiled this charging system that's absolutely mind-blowing. They claim it'll give their latest EV model 250 miles of range after plugging in for just 5 minutes. 5 minutes. That's basically comparable to filling up a gas tank. And if that technology delivers as promised, it could remove one of the biggest barriers to EV adoption, the charging time concern.
That's impressive. Are we going to see BYD cars on American roads soon?
Well, that's the interesting part. Despite their success globally, BYD and most other Chinese EV makers don't currently have a presence in the US market. There are, trade tensions, tariffs, and political considerations that have kept them out. So Tesla still has this home field advantage in the US, which is probably saving them from an even steeper sales decline.
So it sounds like Tesla is facing this perfect storm: political backlash at home and fierce competition abroad.
Exactly. And it's this global competitive landscape that makes Musk's political activities even more risky for Tesla. Like, they're already fighting this uphill battle against incredibly strong competitors like BYD, and now they're alienating a significant portion of their potential customer base at the same time. It's just, it's a really precarious position to be in.
So, when we look at everything we've talked about today, what do you think this all means for Tesla going forward?
I think we're seeing like a real turning point for Tesla. This isn't just a blip or a bad quarter, you know? This 13% sales decline is a symptom of deeper issues. The competition is getting fiercer, especially from companies like BYD that are innovating rapidly and selling at lower price points. Plus, the whole Musk factor is creating this brand identity crisis that's really hard to overcome.
Do you think they can bounce back from this?
They absolutely can, but it's going to require some serious course correction. Tesla still has incredible brand recognition and technology that people love. But Musk might need to make some tough choices about his political activities versus his role as CEO. And honestly, they need to figure out how to reconnect with that core EV audience that's been drifting away, especially in blue states where their loyalty has dropped from 72% to 65%.
What about new models? Couldn't those help turn things around?
That's a great point. Tesla has promised the Cybertruck and other new vehicles, which could definitely generate some excitement. But the question is, can they innovate fast enough to counter what companies like BYD are doing? And more importantly, can they address the pricing issue? Because right now, Tesla is positioned as this premium brand in a market that's getting more competitive at lower price points.
And what about internationally? Can they recover in places like Europe where sales dropped by almost half?
That's going to be super challenging. The European market is extremely competitive, with lots of domestic brands offering great EVs. And Musk's support for far-right parties hasn't exactly endeared him to European consumers. They really need to rethink their international strategy and possibly, create some distance between Musk's personal brand and Tesla as a company.
It sounds like Tesla is at a real crossroads.
Absolutely. This is that moment where they either adapt and evolve or risk becoming like the cautionary tale of how even the most innovative company can lose its edge. The decisions they make in the next year or two will probably determine whether Tesla remains a dominant force in the EV market or becomes just another car company.
Well, we'll definitely be keeping an eye on Tesla's next moves, that's for sure. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Tesla Sales Plunge: Biggest Decline in History. If you found this conversation interesting, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our future episodes.
And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you own a Tesla? Would you buy one right now? Has your perception of the brand changed because of Elon Musk's political activities? Drop a comment and let us know.
And if you enjoyed this episode, please give us a like or share it with a friend who am I.